Hi, I'm Cameron.
And I'm Hayden.
And this is
Until the End of Crime.
Hayden.
Yes, Cameron. Okay, pause. You should go and rate and review us right now. Our goal is to hit 50 reviews by December 1st, right?
Well, this comes out Thanksgiving.
Our goal is to hit 50 reviews
by the new year.
By the new year on Apple Podcasts. And right now, we're already at 36.
We have 37 ratings.
37 ratings.
And about 10 reviews.
And 10 reviews. Okay, so I misspoke. But January 1, 50 reviews.
We do appreciate everybody who has rated and reviewed so far.
100%. You guys help really make a difference. We appreciate you.
With that being said, how do you typically celebrate Thanksgiving?
Well, I think you know how I feel about holidays. I think it's great to not work. Hate that. Hate working.
Sure.
But when it comes to holidays and this kind of traditional idea of gathering and celebrating, I don't know. That really hasn't been the same for me since my father died. Maybe even before that. But definitely since he's been gone. So every holiday comes with its own set of emotions and frustrations and memories to navigate.
You're giving me nothing for Thanksgiving.
That's not true. I gave you so much.
You were like, I don't do anything and I don't like holidays.
I don't. I don't care about holidays from an emotional standpoint or an emotional context. I don't gather with my family and feel warm and fuzzy and really fucking thankful that we're all there together.
Do you eat turkey?
No, I hate turkey. I think you actually know that.
Do you eat yams?
So, do you want to know what I like about Thanksgiving? Is that what you meant to ask?
I guess. I don't know. I didn't realize asking how you celebrate Thanksgiving would be so loaded.
Sorry, I just have a lot of complicated feelings about those kind of celebratory, family-focused holidays. But I guess here's what I will say. My Aunt Nancy makes a really delicious sweet potato casserole. So I love that. I'll eat that. That's fantastic. My grandmother used to make stuffing or dressing with gizzards, and I always thought that was really sick. So I always hoped that there was a non-gizzard option, and sometimes there was.
So you prefer dressing to stuffing?
Yeah, I hardly know the difference, but I think dressing is never in the turkey, right?
Yeah, stuffing was stuffed in the bird.
Yeah.
And dressing was not.
I can't imagine I would like stuffing.
No.
It would taste like turkey, right?
I don't know.
Is that part of the point?
I don't eat it. I don't like either.
Oh, I like dressing.
I actually don't like most Thanksgiving foods.
Okay. Makes the nastiest fucking dressing, and he always has to make it. He thinks it's his, specialty, and it's especially disgusting. It's so gross. He takes, a loaf of bread, a white loaf of bread. He roughly chops it drunkenly. He throws a whole bunch of shit in it.
Let's be clear, he's drunk on rum.
And he fills it to the brim with poultry seasoning. It's so bad. It's so bad. But he feels like a chef when he makes dressing. He's a good person.
Yeah.
Terrible at making dressing. It's not good. When I was a kid, we would celebrate Thanksgiving by going to my grandparents' house.
Yeah.
And all of my dad's family would be there, which, as you know, is large. But for listeners, my dad is one of 9 children. And usually my family would be there, a very large and significant portion of my family. And everyone would bring dishes. My Aunt Audrey always made tons of pies. And so when I was a kid, my favorite was pumpkin pie. I really liked pumpkin pie. And then my Aunt Audrey would also make buttermilk pies. I think sometimes would be buttermilk without coconut, and then with coconut, and then a coconut cream pie, and pecan pie. And she's very good at pastry. And so I always looked forward to that. As I grew older, I started to like the coconut buttermilk pie better. but all of it's delicious. So I hope that kind of answers your question. And I would eat ham, but I don't ever remember us doing anything like, why are you thankful?
No, my family doesn't do that either.
And maybe they would watch sports games on TV.
Oh, yeah.
But I'm having to like really scrape my brain. Like I'm having to go back to when my grandfather was still alive in their old farmhouse out in Ray Point. I feel like I have this vivid memory of my Aunt Crystal yelling and shouting at the TV while the Cowboys were playing.
That sounds right.
Yeah, and she was like really pissed off that they were losing. But of course, this had to be like mid-90s.
That was when they
90s?
were doing really well at that time, right? America's team.
What a joke. Why are you asking me that? And then we would play dominoes and cards. So there would be some of that, and my cousins would all play together. But my closest to me in age cousins are either 5 to 6 years older or 5 to 6 years younger. I was born in this kind of
weird middle
wasteland
area
period. So I have a whole bunch of cousins that are ancient. I think some of them are in their 50s.
5 to 6 years older?
No, the ones that are
No,
old.
I'm just kidding.
Like, I think Deanna and Julie might be in their 50s because they're close to my Aunt Tracy's age. And then, I have my youngest cousins. Actually, I think is my youngest first cousin.
My dad's one of 8, so
21?
my oldest cousin is late 50s.
My cousin has to be at least 21.
My youngest is 24, my youngest cousin. Well, she'll be 24 in the middle of December. She was born in 2000.
All of this was about Thanksgiving, and I somehow managed to get way emotional and have such I've kind of had a visceral response to your Thanksgiving question. I didn't realize it was going to piss me off so much.
I definitely didn't either. And I'm trying to think back to the times where you've asked me questions where I responded that way.
Also, one Thanksgiving, my mom made mashed potatoes, and we all sat down to eat. And I was like, okay, we've got mashed potatoes. Like, there's one thing here I know I like. Mashed potato. And that's not true. My mom does make green bean casserole, and I think that is the best shit in the world. So I was like, okay, I've got mashed potatoes, I've got green bean casserole, and there is some spiral ham. I'm good. Mm-hmm. I went to take a big ass bite of those mashed potatoes, and I was like, what is going on in my mouth? And I looked at Andrew.
Did she mix up the salt and sugar?
My mother, instead of using milk, put French vanilla creamer.
Of course. That is such a Belinda thing. That is so Belinda.
Every one of us was eating and just looking around. And I was like, Mom, your mashed potatoes are like vanilla. They're sweet. And she was like, oh, that can't be right. And I was like,
did she take a bite? And did she double down?
She did try it, and she was like, these taste fine to me.
Of course.
And then Miranda was like, no, something is weird. And then I go up and I get up, and she's like, okay, I used creamer. We were out of milk. I was like, why didn't you just say that? Why did you try to act like we were all crazy and that these potatoes were normal? And poor Andrew, that was one of his first holidays with me.
No, that's what he needed to see.
You're right. He needed to be exposed. But she fucking made those mashed potatoes with French vanilla creamer, and she did it knowingly. And then had the gall to be like, no, they taste fine.
They're so delicious. I love these.
It was so weird. I forgot about that. That was like a Twilight Zone moment where I was like, I can't be getting this wrong. Like, potatoes aren't sweet. Oh my God. Okay, anyway.
This time, my mom used French vanilla creamer.
It was so wild. It was so wild. And if memory serves correctly, my mom got really upset at us for even mentioning it. Like,
but why would you not? If you didn't know that she had to use a substitute and that she chose
French vanilla, what I assume was Coffee Mate.
Yeah, it was an interesting choice.
I also remember telling her, like, you should have just left it potatoes. Like,
yeah,
just mash the fucking potatoes, throw some butter in.
Throw extra butter.
Yeah, like, I know half and half or milk is ideal, right? But to use French vanilla creamer.
Or a little bit of water. And like I said, extra butter and a little bit of water if you're concerned about the consistency.
Yeah.
But not French. You know what? I know that you're out there and you're thinking about what you can add to your mashed potatoes for Thanksgiving or for Christmas, whatever. Or for any holiday that you're going to be celebrating that mashed potatoes would be on your table for. Skip the French vanilla coffee creamer.
Absolutely. Do not do that. But maybe a little chicken stock?
Look, there were options here.
I bet that could have been tasty.
There were options. Choices were made.
Yeah. Bad choices. Bad choices. That was rough. That was rough.
You ruined some good potatoes.
Not some. A lot.
Okay, so today we are in Jupiter, Florida.
Okay. I think a season of American Horror Story was in Jupiter, Florida, and that season was Freak Show. Does your case have anything to do with freak shows?
No, I don't know. Maybe we'll remember to revisit that at the end of the episode and we can get your take on...
Freak Show?
Well, on if this... So we're at the residence of Jim and Muriel Sitton.
I love that name.
Jim, yeah.
No, Muriel.
I was just kidding.
Oh, it's such a good name. Muriel.
It makes me think of Harry Potter.
It makes me think of Courage the Cowardly Dog.
Auntie Muriel.
Auntie Muriel.
Yeah, it's the Weasley kid's aunt.
Is she in the movies?
She might be at the wedding in the movies or mentioned in the movies.
It's been so long since I've read the books. Okay, anyways.
They live there with their 6-year-old daughter, Makayla. The Sitton family home was the gathering place for Thanksgiving 2009, which was on November 26th.
Oh, that's recent. I thought this was going to be old-timey-wimey.
15 years ago.
Okay. Relative to my lifespan, I was alive in 2009.
You were in high school.
Yeah.
That wasn't recent.
Okay. Well.
That's actually my sister's birthday.
Oh, Thanksgiving 2009?
Yeah, November 26th. It was her 18th birthday.
Wow.
Because she graduated high school the same year.
Yeah, except she's older.
Right. Should she be younger?
Yes.
Oh, why?
I don't know, but that's what my brain tells me.
Okay. Well, all in all, 16 people were there for Thanksgiving.
Okay.
Which, because there are 16 people present, it could become a bit bogged down with all the names and relations. So just bear with me and I'm going to do my best to give you reminders about who is who and to not tell you names that would further confuse but not contribute to the story.
Yeah, I need as few names as possible.
I'm going to do my best. So we have Jim, Muriel, and Makayla Sitton, who welcomed their extended family for Thanksgiving into their home. In attendance were Muriel's father and mother, Dr. Antoine and Raymonde Joseph.
Okay.
Carol Marriage.
Carol Marriage?
Yes. That is Muriel's aunt.
Okay.
And then her husband.
On mom's side or dad's side? Probably mom's side, right?
I'm going to guess mom's side.
Okay.
But I don't know definitively, but I think it's safe to say mom's side. Muriel's aunt and her husband, Michael, were also there.
Muriel's aunt?
Yeah, Carol.
Okay. Right. Okay.
And their 2 daughters were there as well. Carla Marriage.
These are Carol's daughters?
Yes.
Okay.
And her pregnant twin sister, Lisa Knight, who had her husband Patrick there as well.
How dare you do this without providing a diagram? I need a family tree. I need to be able to visualize who is who. I'm already confused.
It's a lot of people. I know.
Okay.
So we've got Jim, Muriel, and Makayla.
Sitton.
And then we've got Antoine and Raymonde Joseph.
Okay, and those are the parents
of Muriel. Then we have Carol and Michael Marriage.
Aunt and uncle.
Of Muriel, yes. And then their twin daughters, Carla and Lisa.
Okay.
And Lisa's husband, and Lisa is pregnant.
With twins.
No, Carla and Lisa are twins. Lisa is just pregnant.
Okay, Lisa's just pregnant. Okay, I got it, I think. Is it fair to kind of make Raymonde the anchor of this chart? Because it seems like the kinship is mostly in terms of who she's related to.
I think so.
Okay. That kind of gives me an anchor point.
I don't know. Maybe Muriel? I don't know.
Oh, Sorry, that's what I meant.
Okay.
Muriel.
Yeah.
Because that's Makayla's mother.
Right. And because it's at their home, I think that it would be a natural anchor.
Sorry, Raymonde is Muriel's mother.
Yes.
And Antoine is her father.
Yes.
And her aunt is Carol.
Correct.
Marriage.
Yes.
I don't remember her husband's name.
Michael.
But they have twins, someone I don't know, and Lisa, who is pregnant.
They have Carla and Lisa.
Uh-huh.
Michael and Carol also have a son
Okay.
named Paul, but he didn't always make it to family gatherings, so they weren't sure if he was coming. He did eventually show up, but he was 90 minutes late.
Okay. I've been super late to all kinds of holidays.
Yeah. That
I
doesn't surprise me.
Usually just don't want to be there.
Right. So really props to you for showing up.
Well, how could I deny others my presence?
Yeah, that would be really selfish.
It would be so selfish.
Yeah.
And that's not me.
No, it's for them,
Right.
which is the only people that you do for are others.
I don't know how to be anything else.
We're going to pause for everybody who actually knows Hayden to regain their composure. No, I'm just kidding. Did you follow all of that? Do you feel like you have a good grasp of
I know
all of
who's
the-
who.
Okay.
I'm aware. You did a thank you. What a very clear and concise job you did.
Of course, anything for you. But I am going to stop there with names.
Okay.
And any other names that do come up, I'll just explain their connection if I know it as we go.
Okay.
All right, so 16 members of the Sittons' extended family gathered around and sat down at 5 that evening to have a beautiful Thanksgiving dinner. Afterwards, as was tradition,
What did they serve? We talked a lot about food at the start of this podcast.
I think they served a lot of food
Okay.
because there were 16 people.
16.
Mm-hmm.
That's nothing.
Oh, God. My family stuff is like, we usually cap at like 7. If it's usually 4, but we'll typically cap.
That's why you and Taylor are going to have 4 kids each so that you then have big family functions.
No. Mm-mm.
Oh, I meant 4 dogs. 4 dogs each.
We're closer to a possibility. Not 4 dogs total, because that's where we're at right now.
Mm-mm.
Okay. So afterwards, as was tradition, the family gathered around the piano and sang. You too, right?
Yeah. After every dinner for a holiday, my family gathers around a piano and sings together. Mm-hmm. That's I shouldn't say that's odd to me, but that feels like a holdover from generations past.
I think that makes sense.
I see people who maybe have not regularly watched television gathering around and singing around a piano. It feels very, also it feels like,
It feels very upper echelon or intellectual.
I was going to say
me.
class disparity. Mm-hmm. That feels like I don't want to use the word rich, but you have had a different lived experience
Yeah.
than most common people.
Well, and Muriel's father is a doctor.
Yes, that makes sense. Yeah. Okay, thank you for recontextualizing, because it seems more hoity-toity than what I think of most people doing on Thanksgiving.
Yeah. We just used the piano as like some place to set things. We didn't open the lid and tickle the ivories.
I think the only person, even in my extended family, that can play the piano is my cousin Deanna. She can play the piano.
We can all play the piano. We just don't.
All of you can play the piano?
My dad can't because he's quadriplegic.
Wow. Wow. Whew. Okay. Well,
The best part was that we both held the laughter until the exact same moment.
You're right. You know what? I don't want to say can't, but I feel like he probably doesn't.
He does not play the piano. I don't think he would either. But my mom can play piano. My sister and I both took lessons throughout school until the piano teacher died, and then Taylor didn't have to finish high school doing piano.
You did piano lessons through high school?
I started in 1st grade.
Oh my God. You must be great at piano.
I'm not. That's the gag. I never was. I was never interested in it. And so my piano teacher and I had this kind of like understanding that I don't know. She did tell me that I had perfect pitch, that I could hear tones and I could find the right tone. If I was listening to something, I could find the right note, but I didn't like piano, and so I never really pushed myself to do well at it. I would just get like whatever my favorite album was or my favorite song, we would get the music for that and I would play that.
That works.
Yeah, it did. I mean, we were there for, well, she got really sick, and so I ended up every year the seniors would get this like special recognition at the piano recital. They would get gifts and flowers, and it was like all about them. And she actually got sick my senior year, and so we never had my senior recital.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's sad.
Yeah. And then she died, which is sadder.
I was just about to say that's sadder. Okay.
Okay, so Makayla delighted the crowd with her singing. And
How old was Makayla?
6.
Okay.
And her cousins Carla and Lisa joined her to perform for the small crowd because all 3 were known to have lovely singing voices.
How old were Carla and Lisa?
33.
Okay.
But because they all sung beautifully, the audience was truly pleased to be entertained by them and to sing along with them.
It's okay. If there's a 6-year-old singing and I see 2 33-year-olds decide that they need to hop in, I'm going to be like, what the fuck?
You don't think they're harmonizing?
I just feel like I'm not this hoity-toity high society. I don't know.
Around 10 o'clock, Muriel and Jim put Makayla to bed. They told her she needed to rest up because the following day was going to be a big day. She was set to perform in the Nutcracker and had in fact been using the time spent entertaining her family as a dress rehearsal for the big show.
Oh, cute.
So the timeline after Makayla is put to bed at 10 is not super clear. The adults were still socializing in the kitchen and probably in the living room or
a solarium,
the sitting room, the study.
The study.
So the adults were socializing in the home, enjoying each other's company or getting ready to leave when a loud noise rang out and Carla Marriage dropped to the floor. The way her cousin-in-law Jim described it sounded to me almost as if a marionette whose strings were cut. That she went straight down.
That's a horrific descriptor. A marionette with its strings cut.
Okay, that was my explanation because he described it as the World Trade Center buildings, but that...
Why would you describe someone you know getting shot as the World Trade Center? You know what? Who am I to question the equivalency they make?
Yeah.
I'm sure it's horrific and traumatic.
Well, yes. And I think
Did they realize she had been... Was she shot?
She was shot.
Okay.
For him, maybe emotionally, it was the same as seeing the two.
Right.
I mean, it was only 8 years after the...
That was probably really still fresh
attacks.
in their mind, too.
Right. Yeah.
So that likening makes sense.
Yeah, but it didn't feel right in a 2024 frame of mind. I don't know. It felt icky.
Yeah.
By 10:15, shots were ringing out and the dispatchers were getting calls from neighbors who knew there was a problem next door and were surmising what information they could about the situation. When the police arrived, paramedics had already come through and taken 2 people to the hospital. They had both been shot but were clinging to life.
Oh my gosh.
Carla was dead, as was her twin, Lisa.
Oh no.
Lisa's husband, Patrick, was one of the gunshot victims who had been taken to the hospital.
Okay.
Muriel's mother, Ramonde, had been shot in the shoulder, and her father, Antoine, was trying to offer her aid when another shot blasted in his ear and tore through 76-year-old Ramonde's sternum, killing her.
Oh my God. Wait, was he shot through the ear, Antoine?
No, the shot was just blasted next to his ear.
Okay.
And he turned and found himself face to face with the barrel of a gun. It was aimed at his forehead, and he watched as the trigger was pulled. But the gun jammed.
He's either incredibly lucky or incredibly unlucky, because I feel like if Andrew had just been shot and murdered while he was in my arms, there's worse things than death.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, so who's doing this killing? Who's this gunman?
And as Paul Michael Marriage turned to walk away, he allegedly muttered, "I've been waiting to do this for 20 years.
This is the the other son. This is the son that's 90 minutes late to the function.
Yeah. And he had actually stepped out of the house like 20 minutes before all of this, I'm assuming to get guns out of his car, but it's unclear why that took 20 minutes.
He killed his sisters?
He did.
Oh, God.
So when the attack began, Muriel had managed to dart into the laundry room, which allowed for her to use the door to the garage to exit the home. But Makayla was still inside.
Where was Makayla's dad?
I don't know where he was during the attack exactly.
But Muriel escaped.
Yeah, she went, like I said, into the laundry room, which had the
And
garage
she would have been
door.
Paul's aunt, right? Or no, Paul's first cousin.
Yes.
Okay.
Because Carol, and we're assuming Raymonde are...
Sisters.
Yeah.
Okay.
I guess Carol could have been Antoine's sister as well.
Could have.
Antoine and Carol makes more sense than Carol and Raymonde.
You know what? That actually does make a lot more sense.
Yeah. But Makayla was in bed still because they had put her to bed like 15 minutes prior. And from outside the house, Muriel was horrified as she watched a shadowy figure walk down the hall to her daughter's room. Paul walked into the room where Makayla was sleeping and shot her twice. He walked out into the hall, hesitated, and re-entered her room, shooting the 6-year-old a third time.
Oh my God. Why?
They think to make sure that she was dead. I also found another source that said he shot her once, walked out in the hall, and then came back and shot her a second time. So so she was either shot 2 or 3 times. But Makayla was the other person that the paramedics had taken to the hospital clinging to life.
Okay.
A cousin of, I think, Paul's was Clifford Jabara, who was grazed by a bullet. He was another victim. Patrick Knight and Makayla, they were the two that were taken by ambulance. He was in critical but stable condition, and Makayla succumbed to her injuries shortly after arriving at the hospital 10 days before her 7th birthday.
That's awful. Mm-hmm. Is Jim alive?
Jim is alive.
Is Antoine alive?
Yes. Antoine...
Why did he only kill the females in his family?
Well, he didn't kill his mom, but I think I get into some of the why.
Okay.
So
We're going to talk about family dynamics.
yes.
Okay.
Witnesses did report seeing a man in a white shirt calmly walking down the street, and this is assumed to have been Paul. But Paul was nowhere to be found when the police arrived on the scene, having fled in his blue Toyota Camry. They commenced a search of the surrounding area, but to no avail, Paul had gotten away. But what would cause Paul to perpetrate this level of devastation on his family, especially on Thanksgiving? As the search for Paul continued, the police were able to piece together his activity over weeks leading up to Thanksgiving. He took out large cash withdrawals totaling $12,000 and purchased several firearms at multiple gun shops. And it was very easy to determine that Paul had premeditated this horrendous attack on his family, and that a very armed and dangerous man was roaming free, posing a threat to anyone whose path he might cross. So getting into a little bit of those family dynamics, Michael Marriage was a successful man, and he had high expectations for his children, especially Paul. He wanted him to follow in his footsteps. I think he wanted all of them to follow in his footsteps, but especially Paul as his oldest child and as his son. But as Paul approached adulthood, he began to battle with severe mental health issues.
Okay.
So before the age of 19, Paul was an honor student who was friendly and liked by his peers at the private school they all attended, which it was noted specifically was a good private school in the source that I found. He played sports, football, soccer, baseball. He was a kicker for football. And his senior yearbook page was devoted by him to, quote, all 32, unquote, of his immediate and extended family members who he thanked for their support and love.
So by all accounts, normal kid.
Right.
Normal, family-loving, honor-achieving, sport-going
A typical
kid.
high-performing, extracurricular-involved student.
The kind of kid that someone would typically go, that's a great kid.
Yeah.
Okay. And that all changed at 19?
Yeah, his behavior was noticeably different
Schizophrenia?
after 19. He exhibited signs of obsessive compulsive disorder.
Okay.
He had insomnia and would struggle to make decisions that should have been otherwise very simple to make. And so all of this made him incapable of meeting the expectations that his father had for him, which caused even further frustration. His parents took him all over the U.S. to seek medical care that would help him overcome his mental illness, but nothing was successful and Paul continued to decline. He became resentful of his sisters, who were younger than him, but were finding more of the success that was expected of all three children.
What did his parents do? They sent all three of their kids to private school. They have these high expectations. They go across the country looking for treatment options. Were they wealthy?
It said that the dad was successful, but also, if we're going to stay along the line of thinking that Antoine and Carol, Antoine who went on to become a doctor, and Carol are siblings, we can probably assume that it's some sort of high-performing, high-paying job,
right,
and that she would marry somebody with a high-paying, high-performance job that would be described as successful, quote-unquote.
Okay.
So like I said, despite Carol and Michael taking Paul all over the U.S. to try to treat his mental illness, Paul continued to decline, and he became resentful of his sisters, who were younger than him, but were finding more of the success that was expected of all three children. According to the episode of Homicide for the Holidays.
Homicide for the Holidays?
Yeah, we can...
Home for the Holidays?
No, homicide.
Homicide for the Holidays?
Yeah, we can thank Oxygen for that.
Honestly, it's a great title.
Is it?
Yeah.
Homicide for the Holidays?
I'm not saying that it's not negative in the way that it glorifies terrible crime, but Homicide for the Holidays.
Okay, well, I watched it, and they said that, quote, Paul developed a pathological hatred for his sisters, unquote.
And that's not funny.
No, he murdered them.
I know, while one of them was pregnant.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Lisa.
After a while, Paul's parents arranged and paid for an apartment for Paul to live in on his own.
And all he had was OCD, because this kind of debilitation, I mean, it can be indicative of other mental illnesses, but so often, especially with young men, especially when we're talking about this like sweet spot of like 19 to 26, 27, that's like the prime age for development of schizophrenia.
Yeah, but there's a host of things that it probably could be, and they either didn't get answers or they didn't have answers for the news sources that were coming around. Because I don't think that his parents have participated in sharing information. So I think a lot of the information is coming from the Sittons. Mm-hmm. And I don't think they knew the full scope of what was actually going on.
Is it possible that they were experiencing a level of denial, and that's why they felt like they needed to see so many specialists?
I mean, yeah, I think anything is
especially for
possible.
A group or parents that pride themselves on the success of their children.
Yeah. So this apartment that they got for Paul made Paul feel like he had been kicked out, which angered him. Mm-hmm. He resented that he had to depend on his parents. He resented that his sisters did not, being 2 years younger than him. And he resented that they did not want him in their home anymore because he had been staying with his parents.
Okay.
It seems that Paul, Lisa, and Carla had issues that superseded the typical sibling rivalry. Around 1999 or 2000, Paul accused his sister of trying to kill him and requested protection from law enforcement, but the request was dropped after a few weeks.
Sounds a little like paranoia.
Well, tensions continued to grow, and in 2006, law enforcement was again asked to intervene between Paul and one of his sisters. Carla claimed that Paul threatened her with a murder-suicide plan, and she filed a request for a restraining order. Again, the request was dropped after a few weeks. I found something about Lisa also dropping a restraining order against Paul because he threatened to kill her for filing it. It seems like maybe those two things were the same and they just got the wrong sister. But it's possible that it seems like all of them were trying to file restraining orders on each other and then dropping them.
Either way, they were plagued by instability.
Yeah. And there were actually some documented instances of Paul being violent with his mother and suicide attempts, including one where he shot himself in the chest previously.
Oof.
One of the most harrowing details I came across was when his parents and sisters realized that he would actually be making an appearance at this family gathering. His mother and Lisa allegedly had a conversation where his mother said, "I hope he doesn't come and kill us all tonight." To which Lisa replied by saying that she had had the same thought, but the two women agreed to not tell Michael or continue the conversation because he would be upset with them for thinking this way.
Why? Okay. I'm trying to empathize and put myself in their position and kind of try to understand if there was, I've been in situations where I am fearful that someone will hurt me. Mm-hmm. And I have those thoughts. And what I choose to do is to not put myself in that position. I do not go to a place where I think that could happen. And I guess for me, if I were to find myself asking or saying, "I hope he doesn't come and kill us tonight," I feel like I might have changed my plans. But of course, I'm not living in this moment. I am not these people. And by no means do I think it is their fault that they were murdered. I guess I'm just kind of like, how did that happen? What was the circumstance that made them feel like we should continue to go anyway?
Let me finish this paragraph, and then we can talk a little bit more about that, as well as some of the familial dynamics that may have impacted his victim selection.
Okay.
So as we saw, he did not kill all of them, which was the concern the mom voiced. In fact, he killed his sisters out of his hatred for them and to punish his parents for the resentment he felt towards them. And apparently, Raymonde and Antoine had hosted Thanksgiving the previous year, 2008, and Paul had been forbidden from attending that holiday gathering.
Oh, okay.
So I think that might help explain why nobody was sure if he was coming. Because remember, he didn't always come to holidays, but it's not clear if that's because he was even included. Mm-hmm. But obviously, the dad, who has high expectations, has a soft spot for Paul. Uh-huh. Because we see that in the exchange between Carol and Lisa when Lisa says, "Mom, I thought about that already, but we can't say anything. We can't talk about that because it'll upset Dad if he hears us saying that." So they didn't know he was coming. And they especially didn't know because he showed up 90 minutes after everybody else.
Right.
And he didn't go to other things in the past, either because he wasn't invited or because he was not allowed to go. But I think, and I don't think that I put it in here, but I think what happened is he called his parents and they told him, "Oh, well, we're going over to Jim and Muriel's for Thanksgiving." And it wasn't an invitation, but it wasn't them just saying, "Oh, well, we're going to go to somebody's," or we're not doing anything for things. Like, they told him where and when they were going to be there. Mm-hmm. So he kind of came on his own, but he wasn't really invited. And I want to say that is a point of contention that Jim and Muriel have after the dust starts to settle from this situation.
That he hadn't been invited.
That he hadn't been invited.
He had been informed.
And that they were not, I may actually talk about it later, but that they were not aware that he would even possibly show up.
Okay. Well, that makes sense. So it sounds like they weren't counting on him showing up.
No, because nobody explicitly said come, but I think he called and was like, "What are you doing for Thanksgiving? Is there a plan?" And they were like, "Well, we're going to the Sittons."
Okay.
So where was Paul at this point? Like I said, the police had been searching the area. They searched for hours. They searched for days. They searched for weeks. And by December 7th, Paul was added to the top 25 most wanted list. Now we're in 2010. Paul had evaded law enforcement for nearly 6 weeks, and he could have been anywhere. He was familiar with various locations throughout the United States since his parents sought the best treatments for his mental health issues. And law enforcement in these places were notified of the situation. On January 2nd, America's Most Wanted had Paul Michael Marriage on their list of fugitives to cover. As previews aired hours before the show was scheduled to, a hotel manager in Florida Keys, Florida, was watching TV with his wife and told her that the man whose face they just saw on the America's Most Wanted ad was staying in room 14.
That would be so terrifying. That would be so terrifying as the hotel manager.
Yes. I want to say that I didn't include it, but there was reward money offered that the...
Well, that kind of makes it exciting.
Right. Well, I mean, it does inspire people to call in if they think they saw somebody. So he did call. He called in a tip and law enforcement arrived. They surrounded the room, established that he was, in fact, in the hotel and entered room 14. When they went in, he potentially made a sudden movement, and knowing the extensive number of weapons that he had purchased prior to Thanksgiving, they did not hesitate to tase him.
Okay. So he was tased.
He was tased.
Not shot.
Correct.
Okay.
They took him into custody. There was a trial. There was a plea agreement. He was given 7 life sentences to be served consecutively, and Paul was going to be locked up for the rest of his life.
Was going to be?
Yeah, which...
Is that what happened?
Was very upsetting to the Sittons.
Because they wanted the death penalty? Mm-hmm. Well, he did murder their daughter.
6-year-old daughter, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The night before her performance in the Nutcracker, 10 days before she turned 7. And they were an older couple.
Okay.
I want to say that Muriel at this point was 42.
Okay. So not that you can ever replace a person who has died.
Right.
Regardless of circumstance. But when we're talking about being a couple where the wife or would-be mother is 42, I don't want to pretend that I know everything or really anything about female anatomy, but I know that it becomes increasingly more difficult for women to conceive as they age.
Even at the time that she would have conceived Makayla, she would have been 36, which is already considered...
Is that a geriatric pregnancy?
It is. So Jim was upset that they didn't execute Paul once they got into that hotel room.
Oh, he wanted them to kill him on sight.
Mm-hmm. I think he was disappointed that they used a tase gun.
I can understand.
Sure. I mean, it's not how justice works, but
no. Sure. But if someone killed my 6-year-old daughter, I think it would be really hard for me to say I give a fuck about justice.
Right, which I know that they get to grieve in whatever way they need to, but it felt like they were, well, I keep saying they, but I think it felt like Jim was more focused on revenge than grief and justice for their family.
It may not be justice, but I think he's justified in feeling that.
Sure. So they wanted the death penalty. And on the one hand, I get it because they know absolutely 100% who committed this crime. But the legal system does not only prosecute cases where there is 100% certainty, and we all know that innocent people wind up in jail, disproportionately those of color or lower socioeconomic status. And so until we live in a perfect, idyllic world where criminals can not only be proven beyond a reasonable doubt, but with absolutely no doubt, I don't personally think the death penalty should be on the table.
Most of the time I feel the same way. Most of the time, I feel like the death penalty isn't justified. But there is something to be said for every time we go through one of these stories and someone murders somebody, I get very biblical, Old Testament style. And I'm like, eye for an eye, bitch. You murdered how many people? And honestly, if it had just been his adult sister, which that sounds terrible, not just, but if it had been Lisa and Carla, and we knew that they had this kind of storied history where they seem to have had issues with one another, and we kind of understand the role that maybe his sisters played in his experience of his mental illness, to me, I can understand the death penalty not being on the table in that instance. But when we're talking about a 6-year-old child, there's no way she could have done something to her cousin that should have led him to ending. And not that his sisters did either.
No, but I think what she did was she got praise for doing things well. She was accepted. She was, quote, successful at something. And it was probably envy. It was probably
watching them sing together and be praised together and be the center of this kind of familial affection.
And maybe that was it. Maybe it was the fact that the sisters, and maybe he saw something or he drew parallels between Makayla and his sisters because they could sing well, because they were
something
accepted.
He couldn't be.
Right. I
wish I knew what his exact diagnosis or diagnoses were, because I want to piece together what exactly went wrong. What was the most likely trigger? What is it that led to this behavior? Because really and truly, most mentally ill people do not get up and decide they're going to kill somebody. So sorry. That's Andrew.
It seems that since this all occurred, there has been a pretty intense divide between the Sittons and the marriages. There's about to be a divide between me and these dogs. The Sittons apparently sued the marriages.
For what?
The Sittons say that they recognize that they lost their 2 daughters, but that they were never informed that the marriages had invited Paul, and they wanted them to pay more than $15,000 in damages.
So what, wrongful death?
I guess. I mean, there was also probably property damage.
That is fair and understandable. Okay.
They made it seem like it was some covert operation, but I didn't really find that to be fair because, one, it was noted several times that Paul did not go to many family gatherings. So because it was their son, they probably said, this is what we're doing for Thanksgiving. And they didn't know that he was going to show up. And then I guess the crux of their argument was Jim likened it to bringing a dangerous animal like a rattlesnake to a party and then holding the person or people who brought it accountable. But Paul is his own autonomous human, not some wild animal being forced into unfamiliar territory with people who don't know how to act around it. So again, I get that they're hurting. Like I said, Muriel was 42. I'm sorry, I misspoke. Muriel was 42 when she had Makayla. So she's 48 at this point. And she was the only child of an older couple, but $15,000 is not going to change the fact that Makayla is no longer here. With all of that said, there is a bit of a silver lining. So Muriel and Jim in February 2012 welcomed a baby girl, Natalia Grace. Natalia, which was the name of Makayla's favorite doll. And then in the summer of 2014, baby Rayla Faith arrived.
They had 2 more children biologically?
They're their children.
Which it doesn't matter, but I'm just curious because if she was 42 when she gave birth to
Makayla, 48, she would have been 51, and then she would have been 53. It's not impossible, especially when you remember that this family is not poor. They've got money.
Right.
So it could have been surrogacy. It could have been helped with IVF.
Wow.
It could have been natural.
All of those things could be true.
I don't think it was adoption. So they still live in the house that they hosted Thanksgiving 2009 in as of 2019.
Why?
Jim said he cannot imagine not living where they made so many great memories with Makayla. I guess to not let that one tragedy overshadow all of the positive that they had there with her.
I really appreciate that perspective, but it is hard for me to wrap my head around.
Different strokes.
That is a mighty different stroke.
I think that some people would not be able to fathom moving, and some people would not be able to fathom staying there.
Well, all I can think about is that you spoke about how Muriel went outside through the garage and saw the silhouette of her cousin Paul entering into her daughter's room and murdering her.
Well, saw the silhouette going down the hall towards her daughter's room. But
Okay.
I don't think saw him enter the room or shoot.
Still, you would be able to virtually retrace his movements and your daughter's last breath.
Yeah. I think for some people that's the perspective, and others can't imagine living somewhere that person was not there, that did not get to experience another place.
Right.
So
I'm obviously not knocking the decision.
right.
I just am trying to put it into a context that I myself can understand.
Yeah.
And I'm struggling to. But if it works for them, I'm glad because they've been through enough hardship.
Yeah. As of 2019, Natalia and Rayla both know that something happened to their sister and their grandma, and that it was the same thing, but they have kept them sheltered from the horrors of that terrible night. And at the time of the update, Natalia would have been 7 and Rayla would have been 5, so probably don't talk to them about how their sister was and their grandmother was murdered. Jim and Muriel spoke of forgiveness and how it is an ongoing process. Jim says that while forgiveness was not an option for him at first, he did eventually come around to being able to forgive. And now the couple says they forgive and things are fine for a while, but then something reopens the emotions and they have to forgive all over again.
I imagine that is the most difficult and enduring cycle, because how could you not be ripped apart by your own daughter's murder?
Well, and I imagine, especially because at the time of this interview, this 10 years later interview, they had a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old. And Makayla was 6 when she was killed. So both of those girls are probably doing things that remind them of Makayla. And so that, I imagine, is probably a big part playing into the, Natalia is 7 and Makayla is forever 6. So I imagine having kids at about the same age as your oldest child was when she was killed probably makes that cycle of having to re-forgive even more frequent than it would be when they weren't the same age.
I imagine that would also make them hyper vigilant as parents. I would be so paranoid.
Oh, for sure. The Sittons credit their Christian faith for their ability to forgive and the strength to maintain the relationship and their positive outlook. They are very intentional about being an example for their daughters as they grow up to realize that they persevered through their faith. And that is the story of the Thanksgiving massacre in Jupiter, Florida on Thanksgiving Day 2009.
Is there any kind of update on Paul or his parents?
No, I think that the parents kind of just maybe retreated because they lost their daughters. They lost their first grandchild.
Did any of their daughters already have any children?
There was nothing about their daughters having children.
That's their entire bloodline just wiped out.
By their bloodline. But no, it seems that Jim and Muriel are the only ones of the 16 people who were there and of the survivors of those 16 people who have spoken out about this, who have communicated with the media. It seems like everybody else has kind of, turned everything in and kept it close to the vest. Again, an example of different people dealing with grief or with trauma differently.
It makes me, and gosh, he could easily be dead by now. But I wonder if Antoine continued to have any kind of relationship with Carol and Michael.
I wish I better understood his relationship to them. Like, if Carol is his sister, probably. But if it was his wife's sister, probably not. It also depends on how they reacted. It kind of depends on how everybody reacted.
Yeah.
But we don't know that because Jim and Muriel are the only ones who have given us any insight into their reaction.
Right. Well, and of course, none of them owe any of us any information or any insight or should have to rehash any part of that horrible event. My hope is that they have all found some level of peace and some level of comfort and a level of survivability.
Yeah.
Well, Cameron, thank you for that incredibly sad and tragic Thanksgiving story.
Yeah, of course. I'm sure that you're very thankful for it.
Almost as thankful as I am for French vanilla creamer.
Almost as thankful as I am for every listener that we have out there on this.
Almost as thankful as we are for every listener who rates and reviews our podcast and has on auto downloading on their favorite podcasting platform.
I do want to wish a happy Thanksgiving to all of our American audience. And
fuck everyone else.
Not to exclude anybody else, but why would you care?
Canadians have Thanksgiving.
But theirs is in October.
What are you thankful for in October?
I'm not Canadian.
Sorry, Rebecca.
Shout out, Rebecca. We're very thankful for you, Rebecca. If you are experiencing a mental health crisis or are having any thoughts of suicide, you can call the number 988. I don't know what to say.
The mental health hotline at 988.
Thank you for knowing words that I don't. A complete list of sources and any links can be found in the show notes.
And that's all we've got for this episode. If you enjoyed listening and want to hear more, please subscribe.
And not to belabor this point, but
give us a 5-star rating and leave a review. It would mean the world to us if we could hit 50 reviews on Apple Podcast by the end of 2024.
Recommend us to a friend. That is probably the number one way that we can be discovered by others.
Word of mouth.
Yes, word of mouth. And make sure that you're following us at End of Crime Pod on Instagram.
And like us on Facebook at Until the End of Crime. And join our discussion group.
Our email address is endofcrimepod@gmail.com. So send us an email with questions or episode suggestions.
Thank you for listening.
Until the next crime.